Hello, screenwriters. Welcome to the premiere of Five Questions with a Screenwriter. And the screenwriter we have today with us is Charles Maxwell. Hey, Charles, how you doing?
Hello, mate. How you doing, Patrick? It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. So, for those who don't know, me and Charles, we have a little history together. So, I'm going to put you on the spot over here. Whenever I need feedback from my screenplays, and with no holds barred, I go to this man right there. He will
Yeah.
not hold back. He will tell me what sucks, what works. So, I really appreciate you with that. So, this it's an honor to have you on this first episode of Five Questions with a Screenwriter. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Actually, I have the same opinion of you. Whenever I finish a script, as you know, you're one of the very few people I give it to because I respect you. Do the same. You tell me exactly what's going on. It's very rare these days. By the way, I think to have a friend who's in the industry who can give you an honest opinion and is not unbiased and we'll just shoot straight. So we do that for each other, mate, and it's a great benefit. And certainly on the my first narrative feature, Zombie Apache, you gave me a bit of a. I got in trouble. I thought I got a bit of a lashing for some of my early draft work. So yeah, it's invaluable. So yeah, I think it's so important to have someone you trust when you are writing, someone who can help you achieve what you want to do, not necessarily their version of what you're trying to do. And that's why I value your input so much, not just as a friend, mate, but when it's time to actually shoot and you've got money on the line, there's a very few people that I trust, and you're one of them. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
really appreciate that. All right, let's get into the questions. So it's five questions.
questions. I
It's five questions. Question number one: what are three screenplays every new writer should read?
Oh no. um, wow, that every new writer should read. I think maybe that's a wonderful question. Okay, so I'm going to say, I mean, people are going to say things like The Godfather or Tootsie. Those are the ones that we're taught in, like in and out of film school. There are a lot of, and I didn't go to film school, but I had a lot of friends who did. Um, there's the classics, the go tos, right? But for me, one of them would have to be Quiz Show by Paul Attanasio. I think it's such a complete a screenplay for the Redford film, in terms of telling a story, but really in terms of subtext, what's going on under the surface as opposed to what's being said directly to the characters. There's such a difference in that film, in what's actually being said under the dialogue, and I love that sense of irony and of multiple levels to things going on. So quiz show's always been up there for me as one of them. And then I would say uh, this is going to be vastly divergent. I would say Ghostbusters for me, because I grew up. It had such a huge influence on me as someone who writes comedy or tries to write comedy and horror and kind of that adventure. And I love buddy movies. And if you know the history of that script, it started off just kind of wildly out of control as this wonderful idea that I think Dan Aykroyd had, and then Harold Ramis came on board, and then the studio came in, and they really molded it into something rather like Star Wars, where it was where it improved significantly once it hit the screen. So that to me, Ghostbusters is up there as one that I adore. Do you know what I mean? And then I think maybe something like, gosh, this is so difficult. Something like maybe The Untouchables, a really good crime drama, or maybe The Town. You know what I mean? The Affleck film. Those are really super tight screenplays, where nothing goes to waste, and they're extremely satisfying to watch. You know what I mean? The characters really are maxed out on the page, and they have such a distinctive voice. But if you give me 10 minutes, I'll come up with five more. Do you know what I mean? It's such a hard thing to do. I think I really messed that question up. But I do. For me, it's like, yeah, a script that where the writers are so clearly in control of the narrative and they're one step ahead of the audience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what I love to see. I love to be surprised, basically, whether it's a comedy or a thriller. Those are the scripts that really impress me and that hold up under scrutiny if you've seen them more than one time and you're still impressed by what they're doing and you end up quoting them and thinking of them. So those are just a few. Those are just I'm surprising myself, in fact.
Question number 2. What is something a screenwriter will never learn in a book?
Never learned in a book. Oh my goodness. I think it's very subtle things like, like restraint and discernment, things that you can only learn by just putting in your 10,000 hours. Um, it's a bit like, I told this story recently about Douglas Adams, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy guy. When he was lucky enough to play with Pink Floyd, he was a huge fan of Floyd, and they played a tune together. I think it was like "Shine On You Crazy Diamond," and he was amazed at the restraint it took to play that because it's essentially a jazz tune, and the spaces in between are as important. The silence is as important as the music, and so it's something like that. Just learning the restraint, uh, discernment, learning also. Like Spielberg says, it's better to the inspiration never shouts; it always whispers. So you have to really pay attention to the story and be true to your characters. I think that those are important things. I think just to elaborate a little bit, it's the idea that if you haven't made, like, I started writing a long time before I started directing or producing, and there is a discrepancy between what comes up in your head and what is realistically achievable in the real world. That's what I mean again by restraint, and also like not overdoing it. You'd be amazed. You go back and you look at the old school writers who wrote stuff like like Robert Ball or the guy who wrote Casablanca. It's about being very concise and it's almost ironic. It's about being precise, but not being on the nose. Do you know what I mean? So, and again, the old school writers, they did it so well. A film like Sunset Boulevard, something like that they were able to. And by the way, those writers worked. They wrote maybe 50 pictures a year. They were incredibly prolific. The old screenwriters under studio contracts. So I think. We've lost a little bit of that. We don't write that much, and so they were highly trained, and they honed their craft almost daily. I think we've seen a bit of a loss of that as an art form. So the sense of restraint, not putting everything on the page, not going nuts, but understanding that if you have a moment or a beat of action, to treat it with respect and let it kind of breathe somewhat.
Question number 3. What is the greatest character arc you've seen in a story?
Oh my goodness. The greatest character arc. Oh my goodness. That's a tough one. What is the greatest? I think it might be the question that, I mean, a lot of people can say this. It's got to be Vader, right? I mean, in my lifetime, it's the redemption arc of Vader that he starts off a human as Anakin, as a good kid, as a good guy. He goes through this tremendous journey where he loses his way, becomes very, very naughty, does a lot of damage. But then at the end, through his son, there is redemption. And he's able to kind of become one with the Force again. In spite of what's happening to Star Wars right now, that is still one of the greatest redemption arcs I can think of, and one of the greatest story arcs in general. He really goes through the whole gamut. He goes from serving the Emperor loyally for decades to literally tossing him off a balcony to save his son. I think that says it all, right? So I know it's a very pedestrian answer, but off the top of my head, I think that's one of the reasons that Star Wars has endured, at least those films. Um, is that they've touched some deep archetypes, some deep, almost like this Jungian, these themes that are so central to all of us, right? So yeah, I'd have to say it's definitely Vader for me.
You know what? I knew you had a special place in my heart because everybody knows I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I swear I did not plan for him to say Vader, but I love that answer. All right. Question number 4. What was the first screenplay you wrote, and what was that writing process like?
Yeah. The first one I wrote was a script called The Vine, which, believe it or not, was a take on a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and the Messianic Legacy by Bajan Lincoln and Lay, which was nonfiction that presupposed that perhaps there was a secret bloodline of Christ. And of course, we all remember it as the Da Vinci Code. That was the best adaptation of that theory. But I had tried my hand previously at that story, and I completely bungled it. And as a Christian now, I'm a bit embarrassed about that. But um, I was so green, Patrick. I had trouble with time contraction, so I was writing the script in real time. I didn't realize you could jump ahead days or hours. I was a complete novice, but the passion was there. So I wrote a 120, 130 page thriller about these evil monks stealing the bloodline of Christ, and it was just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. But there was an impetus there to kind of improve, and it wasn't. I wrote a lot of kind of lighter fare comedy. It wasn't a comedy. I later transitioned into things that are a little more, a little less serious. You know what I mean? So here's the thing that I think is super important is to understand when you're writing a screenplay, what are your intentions with that thing? Do you want to sell it as a spec on assignment to a producer, which is the way we used to do it? I say we. I haven't done it that way, but that was definitely there was a speculative market in the 90s and the 20s when I moved here. Now that has dried up to some extent, and it's much more about, well, is this something you want to sell to the studio or something you might want to do yourself? If it's something you want to do yourself, you have to learn, again, restraint, but how to write within a budget. So I was writing these $100 million specs that you just need so much. First of all, need to get very lucky, but then for a studio to jump on board and fork out $100 million, it's very rare. They're not going to do that unless they are absolutely certain that this is something they love. But if you're writing a script that is maybe something you could do for 100,000, 250,000, maybe $1 million, then that's something where you're not reliant on other people to make your dreams come true. And that was the key for me, was realizing, write for yourself, write something that you can make. And so I did, and that was very informative about, because then whatever you write, you have to be able to go away and find a way to shoot. So I think know what you're writing for, not just the market, but like what is the budget? How's it going to get made? So for a lot of us, writing the script is just the beginning of the process. It's not the end. And I do encourage people, especially in today's film market, to think about making your own films if you can. Think about, things like crowdfunding or making films independently of Hollywood is something that's becoming quite common. So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Okay. I have to say that's pretty ambitious for being your first screenplay, I have to say.
Yes, completely bonkers, right? And I still have it somewhere if you need a sleep aid, if you're having trouble sleeping. Um, but yeah, I learned a lot. Look, a lot of what you do as a writer is, from my perspective, you learn through your mistakes, right? And you must be prepared to rewrite. I've never written a first draft and thought, wow, that's it. And in fact, some concepts require draft after draft after draft. Um, you know what I mean? You just don't know how it's going to go until you really try.
All right. Final question. You get to plan and go on a date with your current main character. What does that date look like?
I'm going on a date with Hatfield
That's
with
the question.
wow. Okay. So first of all, so I'm writing an IP right now called Zombie Apache. So my main character is a sheriff. Um, so I've never been on a date with a sheriff. Imagine you'd have to starch your shirt, and be on your best behavior. Maybe not drink too much. I would actually, the way Hatfield's written, he's a gentleman. So even though I look like this, he would probably be very complimentary about the way I looked. I would hope, be polite, and who knows where the date goes from there. Um, but yeah, yeah, I suppose it would be, I think, a bit disappointing for the sheriff, but I would certainly get a big kick out of it. Yeah.
Okay, all right. This has been 5 questions with screenwriter Charles Maxwell. Charles, are you writing anything at the moment?
Yeah, I am actually, mate. Which you'll know shortly because I definitely need your read. So I'm again, I'm kind of following my own advice, which is that write something you can make yourself. We did that, and now I'm working on the sequel to that IP. And really, the reason for that, Pat, is that I had so much fun making it, and I had such an amazing crew and such an incredible cast. It was a bit magical. It was hard work, but I really did fall in love with it's been like a decade since I've been on set. It took such a long time to get back there. And so partly based on the desire to get back into it again, I'm really trying to develop this IP. And again, it's a little indie horror comedy film. Um, but the irony is that at this level, I have more creative control than someone like 10 times my size. And also there's something about making a film where your resources are limited that forces you to think outside the box. And you do actually become more creative. I think it's one of those challenges that can really bring the best out of filmmakers. So that's why I'm writing the sequel, and also because I had such a blast. I had such a blast writing and directing it. That I want to get back into it.
Nice. All right. And then what's a recent film or TV show you've watched you would recommend to our viewers?
Oh dear.
I know,
uh,
like, first of all, like Charles. Oh my, he is so tough. I mean,
uh,
like he hates everything. So,
yeah.
so it's
Well,
okay.
no.
It's okay if you don't want to recommend anything.
What can I in good? Oh, I know what I can. I thought Gangs of London was spectacular. The show that's currently on Prime. I think it went 2 or 3 seasons, and it was. I think it's by the guy who produced by the guy who did The Raid. He's a Welshman, I believe. I want to say Gareth. I forget. He's just a fantastic action director, producer, and Gangs of London was both very well written and extremely well directed, I thought, and the actors were fantastic. That really surprised me. That's the standout for me in the last couple of years, I have to say.
All right, Charles. Thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to reading your next screenplay.
Yes, sir. Coming soon. Coming shortly.
All right.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Of course.
God bless.